you know, there's no money to feed the poor, but they've always got money for wars. $95 billion they just rammed through the House for all theaters of combat. What do I mean with that? Well, they've given $8 billion for the Indo-Pacific. What does that mean? It means to attack China. And they say this very plainly in some outlets. They say countering China. I mean, you counter someone who's attacking you, usually. I don't know what China is doing to attack the United States. This is in the imagination of some people that they are doing something, but okay. So that's one theater. The other theater is against Palestine and against Iran. And then the other one is Russia through Ukraine. So the United States is essentially funding its proxy wars. Yes? Now you can see here, these are 4 separate bills in one package. Okay? And they've been all put into one before being sent to the Senate, where they will undoubtedly be approved with maybe some minor changes. And you can see here the first 3 include $60.8 billion to help Ukraine in its war with Russia, $26.4 billion for Israel, $8.1 billion to counter China in the Indo-Pacific. Let me go through these. So the first one with Ukraine, they say here to help Ukraine in its war with Russia. Now, I've covered the Ukraine war extensively, and let me tell you that this is flogging a dead horse. I mean, these billions of dollars that they send are just going to be kickbacks. It's bribery and corruption. Okay, a lot of this money doesn't even reach the front lines. And one of the things that I covered extensively in the Ukraine war were the munitions and the basically the artillery shells, particularly in addition to Russia's defenses. These 2 things, along with the drones, this trifecta are what defeated Ukraine. There's no coming back from that. Ukraine is lost. It's lost. Those territories that Russia annexed are never coming back. They're really never coming back. I mean, short of a nuclear war, you're never getting them back. And short of diplomacy, which is even more improbable than a nuclear war, they're never coming back, because the West refuses to engage in proper diplomacy with the Russians. Were they to, I'm sure the Russians would be willing to find a compromise, but alas. So this is, to me, this is a joke. You know, this is just basically the US government throwing money into production, which can never even hope to meet what the Russians have. Remember that the most important munition in this war is the 155 millimeter artillery shell. And the Americans, they need decades, literally decades, to catch up to the Russians. It's not happening. Forget about it. Besides, it's not just production, it's also stockpiling. I mean, the Russians have been very smart. They've stockpiled this stuff. So when we're talking about military aid and you've already lost the war, I mean, what is it except a joke? Now, when it comes to, as they say here, fighting Hamas and Iran, I mean, once again, the US and Israel are stuck in a 6-front war. Even, it's actually 7 if you count Iran. They can't hope to win. They really can't hope to win. And right now, Israel is fighting for its own legitimacy at this point. Okay, it's not just fighting Hamas and Iran. Israel is fighting the world for its legitimacy, and that's already gone down the toilet. Now, this money, these couple of billions that they've given the Israelis, what makes this scandalous is that the Israelis, as you'll see in a moment, in the next segment, they've committed unspeakable crimes in Gaza. Now, obviously, the mass graves are one element of these unspeakable crimes. I mean, we can go back also decades and find the exact same things done today, done decades ago, of course. This is nothing new. But within the context of this war, when the United States has a policy not to arm or to supply or to replenish an army that is committing war crimes, and then they violate their own laws in the US to replenish an army that is committing war crimes, this is corruption. This is scandalous. Okay? So under their own laws, the US should not be supplying Israel. Not to mention that we saw with Iran and we saw with the resistance. What are they going to do with these 26 billion? I mean, make no mistake, this is a lot of money. Usually Israel, they'll get 36 billion over, or 38 billion, for example, was the last package over 10 years. So this is almost all of that in one fell swoop. Obviously, when the Americans give the Israelis 3.8 billion a year, that's what they tell you about. I think it's much more than that. But nevertheless, my point is, what are they going to do with this money? They're going to buy more Iron Dome batteries, or manufacture more Iron Dome batteries just so Hezbollah can destroy them. And then what? They're going to, buy more artillery shells. They're going to buy more F-15s or F-35s. To do what? To keep losing? Okay, keep losing. Well done. So this is futile, in my opinion. It's completely futile. And now when we come to China, I mean, let me put it this way. I was trying to formulate this in my head the other day, and I came up with this phrase, okay? If you think that fighting Russia in Ukraine or fighting the resistance in Palestine was difficult, wait till you see what China does. China is going to make the war in Ukraine and the war in Gaza look like a joke. Do you understand this? If it comes to that, they will destroy the West. They will sink it into the ocean, all of it. China is a beast that you don't even want to wake. It's a dragon. Seriously, do not underestimate, because underestimating the adversary is exactly what the Americans did with the Russians in Ukraine. They underestimated the Russians. That's exactly what they did, and that's exactly why they lost. And the same thing is happening in Palestine. The Israelis underestimated Hamas. And what happened on October 7th? They got a giant M16 shoved up their ass, to put it bluntly. So underestimating their adversaries is exactly what they do in the West. And they are underestimating China. Just because China has been patient thus far, it doesn't mean that they will be so in the eventuality of war. Okay, so this is ridiculous. You're only trying to anger the Chinese by giving 8 billion to Taiwan. Okay, I mean, keep in mind, 8 billion, not all of it is going to Taiwan, but the majority of that 8 billion, the bulk of it, is going to Taiwan. They like to mask it and sugarcoat it with, oh, it's for the Indo-Pacific, and they're already trying to stir trouble through the Philippines and so on. Now, I want to show you, just very briefly, this nut job over here, Mike Johnson, because he is the current Speaker of the House, and this is after they got rid of McCarthy. And, he's been trying to stave off a rebellion within his own party, because they want this money to go to more urgent things domestically. And of course, the senators in the United States, they usually oblige the military-industrial complex, and they don't even bother with this stuff. So he has had to manage the interests of the military-industrial complex while trying to silence a few people in his party that are a bit unusually picky about domestic things, as if the U.S. Congress ever does anything for anyone. Anyway, let me play you this clip because it's really funny.
Israel is a critical ally of ours, and I think most people understand the necessity of this funding. They're fighting for their very existence. They're the only stable democracy in the Middle East. I mean, of course, for those of us who are believers, it's a biblical admonition to stand with Israel. We will, and they will prevail as long as they're with them. And this is an important, very important symbolic gesture and a very important replenishment of their stockpiles, for example, of the Iron Dome. The reason they shot down all those drones and missiles in the last attack by Iran is because we assisted with that. I think the American people understand the importance of that. Israel is a critical ally.
Okay, I mean, where do we even begin with this nonsense? It's the only stable democracy in the region. What happened to all your friends in Jordan and Saudi Arabia? What happened to them? You forgot about them? Anyway, there's this thing with, it's a biblical admonition to stand with them. No, it's not. It's not really. You're an extremist and a nut job. That's what you are. And I found Elijah's joke here very good. He said, Abu Johnson al-Amriki. This is basically his ISIS, the ISIS version of Mike Johnson's name. right? That's the nomenclature. That's how you would name him if he were in ISIS. Abu Johnson al-Amriki. Yeah, that's very good. I think I prefer that to Mike Johnson. So all those in favor say aye, and then from now on we'll refer to him as Abu Johnson al-Amriki. So it gets better. It gets better. I've got another clip for you. This is from your progressive side of the Democratic Party, who of course are very pro-peace and very loving of human rights. So what do? They support the military-industrial complex.
Dr. Snyder, your opening was, I think, very illuminating as to the connections here between different geopolitical theaters and how we can make sure that we continue to defend democracy, both domestically in the United States, but also globally. I wanted to touch a little bit briefly on, and pick up a little bit, very briefly, on your exchange with Representative Khanna here in what you assessed as a mistake in tying Ukraine to the conflict in Gaza. And also presently, as you mentioned, the necessity of passing aid to Ukraine as quickly as possible. Could you speak a little bit, expand a little bit more on where you see that entanglement or detriment in tying the conflict in Ukraine with what is happening in Gaza and with the Netanyahu's government's decisions to advance in Gaza, and how the U.S. relates to both of those things differently?
On the issue of Gaza and Ukraine, I'll be as specific as I can. As I read it in late 2023, in a different political context than the one we're in now, and in a different stage of the war in Gaza than the one we're in now, the Biden administration made a political calculation that bringing Israel and Ukraine together would be the most likely way to get people from both sides of the aisle to vote for a substantial bill. I believe that was the reason at the time. I was not party to those considerations. However, months later, with two other things having happened, the first being that the war in Israel has gone through several stages in the meantime, and our having gotten past any place where the Israeli military response is going to lead to a political solution. And secondly, the extreme difficulty in getting Ukraine aid to pass in any form. Those two things change the overall political situation. For me, who's not in the legislature and not in the executive branch, what I see is the qualitative difference between the two events. That Russia invading Ukraine objectively aids the Chinese position in profound ways, which their political warriors try to exploit. But it also threatens world order in ways that are essential to the United States and to its European partners. Whereas the conflict in Gaza is a horrifying terrorist operation, which must lead to some kind of political solution. It won't be solved militarily.
It's lovely, isn't it? It's lovely listening to the neocons. I'll let the clip finish.
My assessment.
Thank you so much, Dr. Snyder. And I think what you laid out so clearly there and in your opening as well is that the core and the key that we have here is in support, geopolitically, instability, is in supporting Ukraine in this moment. Having U.S. military assistance and broader global assistance to Ukraine should be one of our top geopolitical priorities.
Oh, really?
It is the key in defending democracy geopolitically, whether your interest is in China, whether the interest is in anywhere else there. All of the focus here is in Ukraine and in supporting and ensuring that Putin and an authoritarian regime in Russia does not prevail in changing the geopolitical order, rule of law, and functioning democracy worldwide. And frankly, I think it's important from my vantage point, on the second point, is that anything that impedes the swiftness and the urgency of our ability to get that support to Ukraine is overall contributing to the volatility of our situation. Would you say that that's a fair assessment?
All of the hostile and Russia and Chinese observers and political warriors want this to drag out as long as possible and praise those who make it drag out. So of course my answer would be in the affirmative. The front in Ukraine is threatened in ways it doesn't have to be. The population is threatened in ways it doesn't have to be. This is a relatively easy war for us to influence in the correct way. It matters to us for all the reasons that you've given, and we ought to do so as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Snyder.
That's a lot of words to just say, hi, I'm a neocon. What a lot of rubbish. I mean, she sounds like a driveling moron. She's a neocon, but she doesn't know how to, quite how to articulate it. She knows other people do a better job than her at articulating the neocon position. She's a neocon. I mean, this whole China's evil and Russia's evil and authoritarian. She drops all the key words, right? Putin, authoritarian, anti-democracy, blah blah blah. And who's going to come and save the day? Oh, of course, it's the United States. Who but the United States to come and save the day, to lead the world to good? This is neoconservatism, right? It's this inherent belief that there is good and there is bad, and only America can bring about goodness in the world through regime change, through whatever. Actually, you can do whatever you want. You can throw slippers at people, whatever you want, right? That's an inherently neocon position. I mean, she is no different than Dick Cheney. I don't mean that like figuratively or I mean, I do mean it figuratively, certainly not literally. Otherwise, I'd be staring at a bald man with glasses. But she isn't any different from Dick Cheney ideologically, right? She is absolutely 100% just like him. And it's funny because she usually pretends she doesn't know anything about Palestine, right? Like one day she knows, and then the next day she doesn't really quite know, and don't harass her because it's not like she has any power. She's just in Congress after all, So it's very funny to watch this, and I'll give you some of the commentary here from Margaret over at Black Agenda Report, and look what she says, because she really articulates this quite eloquently. And she says Trump engineered Republican support for the Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan TikTok bill. Every Democrat voted yes. Remember when they try to tell you that Trump is a fascist outlier, a singular threat, etc. If he's a fascist, well, so is AOC, right? If he's a fascist, so are AOC and the rest of the quote-unquote progressives. And she also says that Donald Trump supports continuing the proxy war in Ukraine. So does AOC. She is on the same page with Trump. Absolutely. Absolutely. And here, Glenn wrote that the view of the establishment GOP, so the Republicans, and much of the establishment Democratic Party is that you should finance the war in Ukraine indefinitely, bomb Yemen, finance Israel's war in Gaza, confront China with at least a Cold War, if not more, bomb Iran, endless war. Yeah, this is what you have, okay? This is everything in a nutshell, and it is completely accurate. And regarding TikTok, why TikTok is brought up, because they have given, this is so funny. So they've given ByteDance, the company that owns TikTok, they've given them a year to divest. And I find this very funny because the US, they always want to come and convince countries to be capitalist, right? They are the poster child of capitalism, right? Capitalist America. So it's funny because everything's tolerated. You can gamble away people's houses, you can play with the economy, you can crash it, you can do anything you like. You have a billion companies, you can have one company, you can do whatever the hell you want, right? You can even be an entrepreneur in the prison industry. You can make money off of modern day slavery, getting convicts to go and do jobs for unionists or basically union workers instead of giving them a raise and so on. You can do anything you want, right? And influence government, you can buy politicians, but you cannot be a Chinese company because that's bad. Especially a Chinese company, that just has people in America speaking freely. So it's not even doesn't really matter what it is, right? But the fact that people are speaking freely and they're learning things, and you've had a lot of the younger generations becoming more enlightened and insightful regarding what Zionism is exactly, what is Israel. And so that truth, right, this illumination is strictly forbidden. And the fact that it's a Chinese platform doing this, which you know, it's not only a threat to Israel to have this going on, but the fact it's not owned by America, it can't be controlled the same way that we're in Silicon Valley. This is, I mean, absolutely forbidden. Divest immediately, right? And so the point is basically give TikTok to an American company so we can control it better, and we can also hack people's phones better and, you know, spy on them that way and through a million other myriad of ways. So this is really funny to me. I find it so funny. I really do. And this is not the first time. Remember, Trump also tried to ban TikTok, and he had this exact same position. He said, sell to an American company like Microsoft. It doesn't even have to be Microsoft. It could be any American company, and I'll leave you alone. Otherwise, you're banned. So that's why this is brought up in this package of bills, okay? And another thing that they're doing is they're taking the frozen assets of Russian oligarchs and then using that. This is what's in the fourth bill, to fund Ukraine, whatever that means, right? Maybe give it to Zelensky's wife so she can buy diamonds in New York, or give it to the army to buy a couple of shells. Who cares, right? It's going to Ukraine. And I find this, again, funny because this whole idea of, no, this is the capitalist West, right? This is capitalist America. You don't touch people's assets. You know, your car, your house, your bank account. This is above everything else, right? It's above God. It is God, actually, in America, right? They even have it printed on the money. And if you're Russian, they will take your money away, though. They'll take all of it. Your yachts, your bank account, all of it. So all these Russians who went to America to be in the free capitalist West, turns out it's not so free. It's not so free. I mean, amazing. Really amazing, right? The Ukrainians are screwed, though. I'm telling you, they're screwed. All of these men who have gone to the front lines, been dragged off the street and shoved in vans, basically kidnapped. I mean, literally kidnapped and then sent to the front lines. They've killed tens of thousands, if not in the hundreds of thousands, right? So this is like, and you essentially have an entire generation of Ukrainian young men who have been killed in a ridiculous war that had no really that had no real reason to happen. It just didn't. And someone who's rational could have avoided this with diplomacy. Someone who doesn't have ulterior motives, right? The Americans do have ulterior motives. NATO has ulterior motives as a consequence because it is controlled by the Americans. And so they've killed an entire generation of men. For what? Well, to expand NATO, to control more of Europe militarily, to deploy more American troops inside of Europe, to make more money in the military-industrial complex. So this money, when you hear about aid, because that is the fundamental word in these bills, it's aid. Well, who is it aiding? Who is it benefiting? These actors, as I said, benefits neoconservatives, military-industrial complex, arms manufacturers, everyone who makes, you know, from boots to shells to magazines, every iota of the production line in the military, all of this, even shoelaces, all of these people are making so much money from this war, and they're not even winning. On the contrary, the more that is dragged out, the better it is for them, because these bills keep getting passed, right? You'll have 60 billion today, and then in a few months or next quarter, you'll have another 10 billion, or, you know, maybe in 2 quarters, you'll have, I don't know, 40 billion, another 300 million over here. On the contrary, the more they lose, the more they win. You understand? So they're losing in terms of objectives, but their bank accounts just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the Russians are sitting there, you know, thinking, what's wrong with these people? So again, these defenses the Russians have put in place, never going to navigate them. The resistance in Gaza, in the West Bank, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Iran, Yemen is only getting stronger, and the Israelis are only getting weaker, and China is only going to be harsher, more difficult to negotiate with and to beat, and so will its punishment of the West should war arise. Again, YouTube demonetized my channel because I'm not allowed to say naughty things about Israel. You know, telling the truth is forbidden. So if you are able to donate a few dollars on PayPal or on a monthly basis on Patreon, please consider doing it, because it would really help me continue my journalism and support independent media. So I'd be very grateful. And the links are in the description and also in the chat. Thank you guys very much again for all your donations and all your kind comments. I appreciate it very much.